Welcome to the Positive Pants Podcast. Mindset, motivation, and inspiration to help you find your positive pants. It's time to let go of negative thinking, understand why you do what you do, and stop the self-sabotage. With your host, Fran Excel.
Welcome to the show. As always, it's Fran Excel, your resident subconscious success mentor, helping you find your very own pair of positive pants so you can get out of your own way and live a life that you love. If you want to stop sabotaging your own success and let go of the stress, then you are in the right place, my friend. Make sure you download your free Stressed to Success guided meditation at bit.ly/stressed to success as my little gift to you for being here. Please do subscribe, share, review. It really, really helps people that need to hear this message find us, and I so appreciate it. In the show notes, you will also find details of how you can work with me and where you can get your mitts on my meditations, products, and printables. You can also find it through the link in my bio on Instagram, which is my second favorite place to hang out. So please do come join me over there at I'm Fran Excel. Tag me in your takeaways, slide into my DMs. I am here for it. So that is the formalities over, my love. So let's jump into the content. I am so excited. Today I have Stefan Chmelik with me. Stefan is the founder of BioSelf Technology and the inventor of the Sensate, which I have been utterly raving about on my stories on Instagram. I've been using it for a couple of weeks now, and I am genuinely, honestly blown away with how much I love it. Stefan and I were just having a chat about that before we came on. I find myself throughout the day just actually wanting to take little breaks to use it just for 10 minutes at a time, but really actually having that desire to do it. The Sensate is an incredible tool. Looks like a big pebble, and it uses near infrasound resonance via bone conduction on your chest bone, combined with uniquely engineered musical soundscapes, which are glorious, in the app. And it's to calm the fight or flight response. It reduces anxiety and stress and can really help you relax on a deep level, even if you've struggled with that in the past. I personally think this is going to be an absolute game changer, particularly for anyone who finds it hard to meditate or relax. So I am so excited to have you here, Stefan. Thank you. I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Fran, thank you so much. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I mean, my personal mission, the company's mission, is all about, in a very positive way, spreading the news about how well Sensate works. We have a global impact agenda. So I'm always thrilled to talk to people about it, and I love that you love it.
I really love it. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You've got some serious qualifications behind you. And what actually made you, with a combination of all this, what made you want to create the Sensate? Where did the need for something like this come from, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, primarily I'm a medical practitioner. Background is 30 years in medicine. Founder of New Medicine Group in Harley Street, which is UK's main integrated healthcare clinic. Like many operations of that nature, it's a bit more virtual these days, and has been over the last period with clinics being closed, etc. But still functions. But I'm now really almost entirely dedicated to pursuing the Sensate mission. And Dad taught me and my brother to meditate when we were very young, so I've been meditating for most of my life. And obviously I used that to inform my work with patients. So I specialized in patients with anxiety, with depression, with pain, with insomnia, etc. And then upon forming New Medicine Group about 17 years ago, the team was kind of brought together, this astonishing medical team, really, with, I think, between us at our height, we had 300 years of clinical knowledge between the team. So an astonishing sort of learning experience and hothouse for new ideas. But we were all very much united by this search for what is the thing that makes the difference in people's health outcomes. So, why is it that some people get better from anything and some people get better from nothing? Yeah, in other words, some people, can't recover from apparently even quite simple conditions. And we've seen variations on what we're now calling, long COVID over decades. So, we were treating chronic Lyme disease 30 years ago, and chronic autoimmune conditions, and the chronic versions of viral or post-fatigue post-viral fatigue type syndromes. Mm-hmm. And the thing that seems to make the difference is, a person's innate resiliency. Which we can kind of call their constitution plus the things they've done for themselves to increase their ability to adapt. Yeah, so resiliency is the ability to kind of roll with the punches. And over many years, really, of exploration, what we found is if you dig down into what resiliency means, essentially it's a way of describing vagal tone.
Yes.
So in other words, the tone of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve has become increasingly popular, if you like. You would think it was just been invented, really, but of course, as beings, we've had a vagus nerve for approximately 500 million years. So we've had a vagus nerve for hundreds of millions of years longer than we've had a brain. And we've had a body, of course, also for hundreds of millions of years longer than we've had a brain as well. So things that are wired into the body and wired into the vagus nerve are much more deeply wired than emotional or brain-based neural trigger responses, which is why, anxiety, depression, phobias have no relationship to education, to intelligence. Yeah, because that part, that emotional, that reactive system is incredibly powerful and impossible to overcome simply by telling yourself, I don't need to be afraid, I don't need to be anxious, the threat is not real. Yeah, so very, very intelligent people have things like OCD. Yeah, they know they've turned the cooker off, but they have to go back and check, or whatever version of the behavior pattern they have is. So these kind of innate, deep brainstem level and vagus level threat perception responses, because that's really what they are. Yeah, it's the brain taking information from the environment, often misinterpreting it, because we have these amazing human brains that can process vast amounts of data. That's exactly what our brains do. They process data, and often they'll come up with a conclusion that isn't entirely accurate to the actual situation. So that's what, as human beings, that's our biggest issue in many ways, is determining where a threat is real or where it's just perceived. To go back to your actual original question, so I've been using breathing techniques, meditation techniques with thousands of patients over the last few decades. And what I really noticed about 10, 15 years ago was that patients' ability to use the techniques really fell off a cliff. And that process has just kind of continued, really. So it's not actually about attention span, because in many ways people's attention span has increased. But we have this problem of what's called continual partial attention. Yeah, this has been described in research at Harvard, Stanford, I beg your pardon. And our attention is simply divided across too many data channels at once. And if you also bear in mind the research that shows that actually nobody can multitask. Multitasking is a complete myth. What some people can do slightly better than others is do more than one thing at the same time by switching, their brain switches from one task to another. But you're not actually multitasking. Your human brain is hardwired to only be able to focus on one thing at a time. So the concept of multitasking really is detrimental, actually, and quite pointless. Just do one thing at a time and do it well, and then move on to another task, right? But that's the issue, right? We have so many data inputs from phones, and a dozen different things pinging on one's phone. I've had to turn off a dozen things so they don't ping too much during the interview. There'll still be something I've forgotten, so something will ping at some point, no doubt. And then obviously all the kind of reminders and the to-do lists that we write ourselves to be more productive, to increase our output. And our brains are essentially incapable of telling the difference between actual physical threat and the feeling of being overwhelmed. Yeah. Because the brainstem, the lizard brain, is literally, a remnant from our days as lizards. Isn't that sophisticated? It's very powerful, yeah, because it has the ability to press the emergency response button, but it's not particularly clever. So it has a very hard time distinguishing between somebody actually chasing you and just too many emails, too many of everything. So we're overwhelmed, and I think this is in many ways the single biggest pandemic that the world is suffering, which is human overwhelm. And our nervous systems only really have one response to this, very effective response, which is to initiate the emergency response, the flight, fight, freeze, as we call it, response, which is most people have now heard of, but it's a real thing, right? And what I found is that a lot of people are living in this perceived threat emergency response level more or less all the time. Without realizing it, because of course it's their everyday experience.
It's normal.
Yeah, it's normal. It's normal to feel overwhelmed. It's normal to be essentially in a state of anxiety and heightened arousal, which is the correct term, which is what the term for negative, if you like, stress. And this increases the body's sensitivity, and it releases adrenaline into the system. It disrupts stress hormones, cortisol, norepinephrine as well. And these are really designed, these are short burst hormones designed to make you run really fast or to fight, whatever it might be. They're not meant to be used like stimulants, like coffee or whatever, because they're highly pro-inflammatory. They're corrosive, and if you dig down into most of the kind of chronic health issues that are affecting people today, you'll find disruption of stress hormones underlie a lot of that. There's a lot of chronic inflammation, whether it's heart disease, obesity, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, cancer, etc. Most of these have a root in inflammation. But of course, if you're in this high arousal, stressed state, then sitting still, calming your mind and noticing your breathing and not feeling overwhelmed is not available to you. It's like somebody trying to learn a breathing technique while having a panic attack. It just doesn't work. You have to have the techniques in place beforehand, so when the event happens, then you can use them.
Exactly.
And this really was my conclusion, was that traditional techniques that human beings have put together around meditation and breathing and relaxation were just simply not working anymore. And indeed, there's actually a very large percentage of people for whom, when they try to self-regulate, when they try to sit down and notice their breathing, they actually feel worse. So there is this kind of
worse, isn't it?
And you've seen this, isn't it interesting? If you want to make somebody stressed and anxious, ask them to notice their breathing. Because then if somebody's chronically hyperventilating, as a lot of people are, they're breathing poorly, they're breathing in the upper chest, they're holding the breath, you then sit them down and say, okay, now notice your breathing. And of course, what they'll notice is how terrible their breathing is. And therefore, by noticing, they activate the emergency response and they breathe even more poorly. So I decided that my mission was to create a way for modern people, modern humans, to develop the skills to be able to self-regulate without the techniques that we've developed over hundreds of thousands of years being useful anymore. So if meditation and breathing aren't effectively of much use to most people, and of course there are a section of people who they're fantastically useful for, and that's great, but I'm interested in the hundreds of millions of people for whom these techniques don't work. So the technology is created really for those people. It's not a substitution for meditation. It's a path to the ability to self-regulate for people who currently find it very difficult. And once they're there, they can then develop whatever techniques they want. But it's an engaging, easy, quick, and enjoyable A to B, because if you can't get from A to B, then there's nowhere to go, right? It's that first step on the ability to self-regulate. And all the clinical information and trials, etc., and patient experience and your experience, as you've noticed, points to the effectiveness of its ability to do that. So we're thrilled that we have developed something that really does do what it says on the tin.
Yeah. And I love the fact that when I started trying it, because I've got a million different tools and techniques and strategies under my belt now, but I can remember when I think back to when I first started this, when I first realized like I just had, and the majority of people have zero ability to regulate their emotions. And when your emotions are driving your behavior, and then you're getting angry and frustrated at yourself for your behavior, it's in this perpetual loop that people don't understand. But I can remember when I first started to meditate, there's this massive misconception about clearing the mind and all of these different things. And I know a lot of people can struggle. And a lot of people, because their baseline, their normal, is in a little bit of a heightened level of stress response, it actually registers as danger in the brain to relax. So you have to start to train that into yourself in a nice, safe, enjoyable. I love the fact that you said it's enjoyable. That's the thing that I found the most profound, because we all struggle to start habits, right? Particularly if you don't understand how habits work. But for me, this has been the one thing where it's like, it's just completely natural. I don't have to put a reminder in my phone. It's just, it's there, and I want to do it because it feels really good and I understand the benefits. And I think that is part of the genius. And I said when I was doing some stories on this, the lanyard, I think, again, just having the lanyard and having it around you as that little reminder to just be able to quickly take it and go, okay, I'm noticing I'm in a little bit of a heightened response, so I'm going to just do a quick 10 minutes, and then it just completely gets you back on track. I just love it. Yeah, exactly, you're wearing it. Yeah, I was talking with my SOS yes. Would you use it when you were in a conversation with something? That was something I wanted to know.
As the inventor, I feel I'm able to break the use case, or bend it at the very least. So the use case is 10 minutes once a day lying down with headphones on and your eyes closed, and that's what we ask people to do. We say do that because that will give you the best results. And most people do get an immediate benefit from literally the first 10-minute session, which is amazing. We find that a lot of people do multiple sessions in a day. They do longer sessions, or they do multiple sessions, which is fine. We haven't established that you can overdo it. It's not electrical stimulation, so it is pure sound. We can talk a little bit about the mechanism itself, but you're using sound, right? Just audible and inaudible infrasound. So we don't think you can overdo it. So I do sometimes use just the vibration element when I'm talking to people, if I'm on long phone calls, because technology and phone calls and keyboards really kind of make your shoulders go up. There's some very good research with electrical muscle receptors that show as soon as somebody goes on a phone, on a keyboard, I beg your pardon, their breathing accessory muscles start to tighten up. So the diaphragm, of course, is the main muscle organ really of breathing, but all these breathing accessory muscles in the neck and shoulders, which move the scapula up and down, are also really important. And this is why so many people have chronic head and neck tension, back tension at the back of the head, those kind of headaches, because there's this upper chest breathing pattern, which is so common, and which technology tends to encourage.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about, because it's using sound and the vibrations together, that's where a lot of the magic happens. So tell us a little bit more about the science behind it, what it's actually doing for us, and the frequencies that we're using.
Yes, actually, my father and my brother were both musicians, and I've been a musician in the past. So music's always played a big part in my life, and I've used music and sound in therapy for, again, decades. And in the last 10 years or so, using a kind of a big piece of clinical equipment that you lie on that sends infrasonic waves through the patient. And that was really the starting point with using low frequency sound. So we found that by using that in clinic, we had across the board improved success rate with all kinds of conditions. So we pretty much used that technology on everybody as a baseline. because it enabled them to self-regulate, it enabled them to improve vagal tone, improve resilience. And I was actually going to roll out a bunch of clinics which with that technology in it, but then I realized that the impact for that was pretty difficult. Obviously expensive technology, upmarket, high street locations. And while on that technology, one day though, I had this kind of eureka moment where this happens, right? The whole kind of concept was channeled, and I realized you could get rid of 99% of the hardware and the computer power by turning the body into the hardware, and by using a phone to replace most of the computing power. So rather than using huge infrasound transducers that had to go through all the big muscles of the back, by placing the device on the chest, and using a small infrasound transducer, what you're doing is you're turning the body into an instrument. So there's this kind of channel, there's this column of air, obviously through the throat right down into the chest and diaphragm. And just like on a violin or a guitar or a cello, you can make that column of air vibrate. In an instrument, you're using strings. In a chest, normally you're using the vocal cords. But all we're doing, in a sense, is using very, very specific harmonic low frequencies combined with what you're hearing in the ear through bone conduction on the chest, which then makes all the air molecules in the chest and throat vibrate. So, from an experience point of view, it's very similar to omming or chanting or certain types of breathing. So, if you're skillful and you have the time to practice those techniques, you can absolutely get the same results. The problem is the learning curve, doing it right, knowing whether you're doing it right, doing it consistently. These are the problems. And that's really what Sensate does. It's a reliable, consistent, rapid methods to produce similar kind of physical responses using sound. So we're combined. So the low frequency sound, which is stuff below 50 hertz, the kind of the rumbles, and it's like humming as well. Humming is also a very good method. Winnie the Pooh must have had a fantastic vagal nerve tone.
Vagal tone, yeah.
He was always humming, wasn't he? So that creating, and there are movements there are exercises, aren't there, in the Brahman yoga techniques, the bumblebee breathing, etc., which are designed to make the chest and throat vibrate and hum. But we're doing it with specific frequencies, which change. So multi-frequency. It's not just simply vibrating, and we're then synchronizing it with the audio content in the headphones. So it's one piece of music that you're hearing, and you choose which piece you want from the app. There's lots of different pieces, and we're adding more later on this year. So it's one piece of music, but just part of the orchestration. Roughly half the orchestration is below the hearing threshold, and it's played via bone conduction into the chest. So you feel it rather than hear it. And by vibrating these kind of air molecules, those then excite other parts of the body. So particularly the water in the body. We're up to 96% water as human beings, 75 to 96% water. And water is a fantastic medium for the conduction of sound. Much better than air. Air is actually quite a poor medium for sound conduction. So whales, for instance, can hear sound 16 kilometers away underwater. Who knows how far they could hear sound out of water, but I don't think we measure that, do we? So water is this amazing medium for sound transmission. It's actually faster than nerve conduction speed. So sound travels through water in the body faster than nerve conduction speed. So it's very efficient, there's very little loss, and it's incredibly fast. So if you want to propagate a sensation around the body, then using frequency that stimulates water in the body is an incredibly efficient way to do that. So I think the mental image I like is it's like having the sensate on the chest here is very much like dropping a pebble into a pond. There's this kind of ripple that goes out, and it has an effect all the way throughout, upwards and downwards. And then if you combine that with the stuff that you're hearing, so you're also having the kind of neural processing element, it's very rapid and it's very powerful, and it's quite and profound in its outcome. And it's not sort of, it's not flaky to think about or talk about frequency or vibration. If you talk to or you read information from the most prominent physicists, quantum physicists, they're saying exactly this. They're saying the entire universe is vibration. Yeah, things only exist. They literally only exist because of their vibrational rate. Yeah, the only difference, I mean, this is actually kind of well established. The only difference between this table and love is the frequency of vibration. They're each is just a moment in time. So by accessing a much broader spectrum of the frequency range, we're doubling the impact that music can have. So we already know that heard music can have massive physical and emotional impact. We're doubling the wavelength. So we're using twice the amount of information in the body, and also you're experiencing it on a cellular physical level, not just a brain level. And given that, given what I said before, that we've had bodies and vagus nerves for hundreds of millions of years longer than we've had a brain, that's incredibly important.
Yeah. Well, so much of the messaging is 80% body to brain, isn't it? But most people have idolized the brain, and it's hugely important, and we love the brain, but there's this huge piece of the puzzle that's been missing from so many kind of mindset, so to speak, techniques and tools and cognitive tools. There's such a focus on the cognitive and the thoughts, but actually so many of those thoughts are coming from your body, and people just don't know this information.
Well, there are multiple brains. I mean, that's accepted, right? Again, that's just neuroscience. There are multiple brains. There are multiple brains in the head, of course, but there are also multiple brains in the body. Ones that we know about, like the gut-brain connection. So the gut is a brain. The gut is officially the fifth brain. There's a heart brain, and I'm sure there are other brains as well that we haven't really quite quantified as brains yet. So I think the whole fascial connective tissue network in many ways functions like a brain. We know that many hormones that control emotional regulation are produced in the fascia. We know that signaling around the body and therefore trauma is locked into the fascia as much as it is into the nervous system. So Daniel Goleman says that we have multiple brains, and actually the brains are the servant of the body. Not the other way around.
Yeah, I like that. So one of the things with Sensate is obviously using all of this and knowing this and understanding this. I always find that when people can understand why something works, there's so much more motivation to do it, which I love. It's why I like to educate a lot. But can you talk a little bit? So you get the in the moment effects, so to speak, but can you talk a little bit about the cumulative effects over time? Because so many people like to do I did that for a few days and didn't really feel anything, or I tried it for a couple of weeks and then I stopped doing it and everything just came back, it was the same as it was before. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the cumulative effects of this.
Well, to be honest, that's almost the entire motivation for designing Sensate in the way that I did, was 30 years of clinical information working with patients. And so I'm obviously I've done research, but I'm a clinician first and a researcher second. And I think that's incredibly important. So we see medical interventions and devices invented by researchers. So researchers are fascinated by brain headsets, but people aren't. People are much more interested in things that will make them feel different. And human behavior change is the holy grail. We've been trying to find ways to regularly and consistently and reliably change behavior for a very, very long time, and it's incredibly difficult. And I think the reason we generally fail is because we approach it from an intellectual point of view. Whether it's diet or exercise or emotional issues, behavioral issues, whatever. We approach it from a very intellectual point of view, whereas in fact, behavior is governed by brain chemicals and emotions, which are physical. So that's why people, it's why addictions are are effectively behavior change apparatus, right? So, dopamine driven addictions. So, and that can be good or bad. It can be, you're playing games on the phone that give this kind of instant reward, but no long-term rewards, are incredibly powerful mechanisms. And of course, food and drugs, etc. as well. People, it's very easy to get into a pattern where you're seeking this kind of dopamine high. But dopamine also, and other hormones, oxytocin, serotonin, etc. If you can work out how to use these for positive behavior change, then that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And you do that at a feeling level. Yeah. In other words, at a physical level. So you can't think the brain out of trouble. Yeah. You have to feel the body and the brain out of trouble, or into positive habits. Yeah. We don't say, oh, I think I'm fearful, or I think I'm in love. We say, oh, I feel love. Yeah. I feel afraid. Yeah. I feel worried. Yeah. I've got a gut instinct. We use these very visceral feeling based descriptions of the things that actually drive our behavior. Yeah. And we're living in a decade of cognitive dissonance anyway, right? So what people say and what they believe, and people go on about wanting evidence, but actually, once presented with the evidence, if it doesn't support what they want to believe anyway, then they'll just ignore it. So although evidence is important, it actually doesn't really, it confirms people's beliefs, but it doesn't tend to change them, interestingly, which is part of the reason why when developing Sensate, we went very much down a clinical patient route rather than a medical route. Yeah. So rather than developing a medical device, which would then be, rationed, if you like, by doctors or prescribed by doctors in a clinical setting, we wanted to empower individuals at home or wherever to be able to control their own behavior, to be able to develop their own self-regulation. For me, that's the much, much more powerful objective. It's taking hands from doctors and giving it to consumers, giving it to people. Because no one understands how you feel better than you. But also we can feel powerless with our ability to change what's going on. So people who fail with diets, people who fail, make resolutions, etc., and then fail to live up to them. And each time we fail, then of course that cements that relationship. So the cliched description from Stanford as well, actually, the neurons that fire together wire together. But it's a lovely sentence, and it's largely true. There are versions of it to make it more sophisticated, but we are what we do, we are what we think, and we are what we feel, and we are the behaviors that we do on a regular basis. So if we meditate regularly, that becomes the default neural network. If we hit the bottle regularly, that becomes the default neural network. So you build up patterns of behavior, positive or negative, by repeating the behavior. So although it's straightforward enough to change behavior, you just do this for long enough for it to become the new habit. If it's difficult, your body, it doesn't give a dopamine response, you essentially don't want to do it, it's not rewarding, it's not enjoyable, you simply don't do it more than a few days or a few
salad over the donut.
Exactly, yeah. So and these responses are very primal, and it's pointless trying to fight them. Yeah, with an intellectual but I want to response. It's not, I know I should response. That's just not going to work. So the technology was always designed from day one to be enjoyable. Yeah, and it's really, that sounds silly and simple, but actually, as I think you understand, the importance of that can't be overstated.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you won't do it. No, you don't get any behavior change without people doing the thing they need to do. And if you go in at that level, that kind of enjoyable, engaging, I want to do it, I don't need to remind myself to do it, I won't resist it level, then one, it works more effectively from the first try anyway, and two, you're much, much more likely to for it to become a pattern of behavior, which then cements this neural network around that pattern of behavior. And we see that, with Sensate and the technology, we see the kind of engagement stats that people, through the app, obviously the app data, the anonymous, of course, app data. We see stats which are unheard of really in the industry. So my co-founder and CEO, Anna Goodmanson, who's in Los Angeles now, raising our new funding round, we're great team. We share similar kind of passion for human potential, and she has a background very much in technology, but also particularly in apps. And she knows, and that's one of the reasons she came to work for the company, despite being able to work for much larger companies than us, is the compelling and really quite unprecedented nature of the engagement that the technology produces in people. Yeah, normally you're talking about single figure stats, whereas our stats are way into double figures. How often and how long people use it for, and how long they keep the technology for. And I mean, this is also why we didn't go for an app only solution. Yeah, and we tried, right? But it seems that it's just not neuroanatomically possible. Yeah, it's not physically possible to produce the outcomes using just heard sound, just airwave compression sound. You need the physical element, because so much of the body isn't the mind.
Yeah.
Or, isn't the brain.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons we're fascinated by the brain. I think Noah Yuval Harari said this, is, we love the brain because we think it gives us an insight into the mind.
Yeah.
But actually the mind is so much more than just the brain.
And that's why it's so difficult to explain that. And I think nobody's really managed to ever kind of give a definition, like a really hard and fast definition of all these different things. And we can use words interchangeably. But, when we're talking about cumulative benefits and improving vagal tone and changing behavior, what are the things that you've noticed, or that other people have fed back to you that they've noticed about using this?
I mean, the single most common piece of feedback we get, and we love this because it keeps the team going, right? We're a devoted team, but we're a tiny startup, and it's tough out there. But the daily spontaneous feedback from users, the kind of "I just had to write to you" kind of stuff, and users really love the technology. They develop a very personal relationship with it. We try to support that as much as we can. But every day we get, "You have changed my life," or, "For the first time in 20 years," kind of stuff. This is what we hear from people. And the percent, and we know also that it's very engaging and it's working well, because the percentage of people who are dissatisfied with their experience is, well under 2%. I think it's 1.12% or something like that. So it's a very close to 98% satisfaction rate, which again is ridiculously unheard of.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so one of the things that I've noticed in particular is feeling more balanced. Even though I've done a lot of emotional regulation, I do heart math all the time, all of these different things, it's on those days where you are a human and something happens, or there's conflict, or whatever may happen, like those human moments, those are feeling calmer, more balanced. And I think people can underestimate the power of that and the difference that makes to your life, because when you're regulated in that way, you're going to make better decisions.
Exactly. So we're also all a bit obsessed with productivity, aren't we, and focus.
Yeah.
And doing more, and having either longer or more efficient to-do lists, etc., or crossing things off our to-do lists. But exactly as you say, if you want better focus, then have a mind which is able to do one thing efficiently at a time. And vagal tone, and the reason it's called tone is because it is like a muscle. Yeah, it's not. It's up regulation as well as down regulation. So it's the ability to respond and roll with the punches. It's also the ability to activate the relaxation response. Yeah, so it's performance, but also down regulation at the same time.
I love that.
Yeah, so we're a non-medical device, yeah, so we don't talk about the technology's effectiveness for medical conditions like IBS or migraine or whatever, but we look at qualities within people's lives, and people feed that back to us. So anxiety, improved ability to cope with stressful events, and feeling better generally, but also quality of sleep. So sleep quality is probably the single, sleep quality and anxiety are the two main things that people report to us have improved.
And they're so linked together as well, and people don't appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably a bit bored almost, aren't we, of being told how critically important sleep is. Well, a few decades ago, of course, sleep was regarded as the enemy, wasn't it? It wasn't that long ago. Sleep less, sleep when you're dead, kind of thing.
Hustle.
Yeah, exactly. But now we know if you don't sleep enough, you're just, you are underperforming. You are a shadow of yourself. So some people choose not to sleep. They choose to have too little sleep. Of course, some people, it's not a choice. And unless there's a really distinct hormonal biochemical reason why somebody just can't sleep, and that's actually rare, then everybody can and should really strive to improve their sleep quality, both the amount of hours one's sleeping, but also then the quality of the sleep within that. It's always going to give you back more functionality, but also more years of life than what you gain by missing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's so funny to think that something the size of this pebble that you can put on your chest, all of these different things, and the profound effects that it can have. And when we're talking about vagal tone and the ability to regulate your emotions, and obviously we know that when you can regulate your emotions, you're not being hijacked by your emotional brain, and you can make these better decisions, and you're operating from your prefrontal cortex, and all of these things that we want to be able to live the life that we want. And we got into a really interesting conversation before we started this about the mission of the company being on a global scale. And I kind of said to you, like, imagine if we had a world of emotionally regulated people operating from the right areas of their brain, not operating from fight or flight, not operating from this nervous system response. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because I think definitely in line with our missions here, but you're a little bit further down the line than me so far.
Yeah, I mean, if we are better, if our vagal tone is better, and we're therefore able to better regulate the stuff that life throws at us, we are better able to resist the temptation to move into a fear-based response. So my personal mission, the mission of the company, is to try and be part of a movement to create a world which is less full of fear. I've got children. I'd love to see my grandchildren. And on current trajectory, there's a number of things that could easily wipe out the human race in the next 50 to 100 years. Some of those we can have little impact on, but many of them we can. So whether it's pollution, ecological issues, plastics, equality, all of these things require a critical mass of human beings to make better quality decisions, to force their government to put the changes in place that will make those things happen. And as long as we're locked in this cycle, and we've really seen that over the last few years, and the pandemic obviously has absolutely exacerbated that in addition, but as long as we're locked in this cycle of fear and therefore short-term decision making, we're not going to be in a position to elevate the human thinking and make those better quality decisions. So I and the company are dedicated to mass tipping point behavior change improvement. So movements that have been going for a long time and have either not grown quickly enough or have failed, like to be honest, the meditation movement to some degree. And since the Beatles brought meditation into the mainstream in the 60s, meditation as a concept has had a lot more acceptance, and it's much more in the academic and the mainstream understanding. So most people now know what meditation is, but still the percentage of people actually using it as a life-changing modality is way too small.
Yeah.
And I don't think that those kind of techniques have the ability to scale fast enough to achieve the kind of tipping point that we need as human beings. But there are companies who are working on wellness who are equally obsessed with human behavior change. So we really want to be part of that movement, which is changing the outlook for hundreds of millions of people. Yeah, because then who are more focused on compassion, more focused on longer term thinking, and able to resist this fear, this incredibly powerful fear-based emergency response, which is engendered when you perceive threat in the environment. Yeah, so whether it's a pandemic, or whether it's pollution, or whatever it might be, whether it's war, whether it's job insecurity, all of these things, the news, of course, all of these things engender fear. So I tell people, stop watching the news. Put down that paper and stop watching the news, because it's just producing this kind of emotional fear-based response in you, which you're then feeding it. That becomes an addiction of sorts. And one of the things that helps me understand why it was so important to scale was when I sort of really appreciated that the human blueprint is basically one of anxiety. So human beings are hardwired for anxiety. Yeah. So all the overly laid back or relaxed or non-hoarding humans didn't make it. Yeah, it was the slightly paranoid, slightly anxious, hoarding humans who went on to pass their genes on. So this is the blueprint that we've all come from. So we shouldn't be surprised that we have a tendency to anxiety or to hoard. And we saw this obviously in the first wave of the pandemic, right? So people started hoarding immediately. It's one of the first human responses. The sign of danger is to hoard stuff. Weirdly, it was toilet rolls, wasn't it? But, and I think there is something. I think there's a way that one could interpret that, but so we should feel okay about that. Yeah, we should say, okay, this is actually how I'm built. Yeah, my first response biologically is to feel anxious. So if I want to elevate my ability above this, how do I rise above this basic blueprint of fear and anxiety? And you do that through self-work. Yeah, and the problem is the pathways to that self-work have become harder, not easier. So we have to embrace technology. We can't be fearful of technology either. Technology is the only thing that will save the world from the impending disasters, the series of impending disasters that could happen. But if we use technology wisely, we can save the world.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I think coming from the modalities that I'm trained in and from your experience, it's like knowing that on a deep level that actually that is a possibility is, I think that's quite spectacular. But I mean, it's just getting that message out, helping people actually understand how much more control over ourselves we have than we realize, and how much we're ruled by early childhood experiences and experiences through our lives that have created essentially codes in our nervous system and in our brains to repeat the same behaviors, because that to our bodies is safe. And I think that the biggest thing for me is there's so many people struggling with anxiety, but then beating themselves up for having it, beating themselves up for feeling overwhelmed. And it's like, dude, look at what you're up against here. You've got the hunter-gatherer situation coming down the lineage. You've got generational trauma. You've got the big wide world. You've got all of these things going against you. You have been taught to be this way. So the more you can understand that on a foundational level of who you are, this is not who you are, it's something you've learned. And that means you can unlearn it. And using
exactly. And it's also how you're built, as I say. So if anxiety is the blueprint, and you're then taught to be anxious and to be short-term thinking in your responses, then of course that's what you're up against. And you mentioned trauma, and I think it's interesting. I mean, we had a whole trauma speciality at New Medicine Group, and when you're working in a clinical environment, you realize how common trauma-driven behavior actually is. So not necessarily trauma with a capital T or full-blown PTSD, although that's actually also incredibly common. But the percentage of people who have some kind of traumatic nervous system dysregulation is much higher than is commonly acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why with my work, why I went down that road of becoming trauma informed and looking at heart math and NARM and things like that, because it's so important to understand this, because I'm helping business owners overcome stress and self-sabotage, right? You've got to understand where that comes from and understand that on a foundational level, you make sense as a human, right? And part of my framework is all about being able to empathize with that part of yourself that needed that solution, so to speak, because that's what it was at some point in your life. That was a solution you to be safe.
Exactly right.
So important to have people understand this. Love this conversation. We talked very briefly about overachievers, and that's something that I think this is a really great tool to help overcome, because it's that judgment of yourself of, am I doing this right? You know, you can't let go of the thoughts and judging yourself, well, what should it feel like, and all of that. And I think this device is something that really does take that away purely by what it's doing for you with the sound and the vibration. It just has this kind of mind quietening response for me anyway, specifically, but it's certainly not something I judge myself on. And I certainly have with other tools and techniques in the past. When you start using them, you judge yourself for like, well, I should be feeling more results. I should be feeling this. And it's when you know that yes, you can have that incredible, profound feeling in the moment that's going to change your emotional response essentially in your behavior, but that cumulative thing over time gives you that motivation to carry on with it. But then again, as we've said before, it's so flippin' enjoyable.
Yeah, it's not an onerous task, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, even now, you know, after several years of using the device, including the clinical work, I often have a session thing, and I'm surprised myself at quite how profound and how enjoyable the effects are. And I think it's you know, Maslow, the kind of hierarchy of needs, if you like, you know, baseline, the ground zero that's built on is ability to feel safe.
Yeah.
That is the overarching number one need that people have, you know, and over and above food or shelter or love or anything else, if we don't feel safe, nothing matters.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the points of overwhelm, by keeping us locked in this kind of slightly adrenal threat perception mode, is we just never feel properly safe.
Yeah.
So then when we try to self-pendulate, try to self-regulate, of course, that unease surfaces, and it's very hard to do that on your own without some kind of guide that's not you.
Yeah.
And that's the point, you know, whether it's a teacher or you know, a device like we're using, the point is it's not you. Yeah, and because it's physical, also you as much as it is oral. Mm-hmm. You've then the mental chatter that will prevent a lot of people from progressing. You know, they're sitting there meditating, but actually thinking about the shopping and whether or not they've got to put you know, the lunch on. Yeah. Because there is this physical component to it, it tends to deactivate this overwhelming mental chatter, which will actually effectively prevent one going into a self-regulation state.
Yeah, so important. I've been loving this conversation. So if you wanted my listeners to take one thing from our conversation and your journey and your mission, all of this that we've been talking about, what would that be?
Well, I mean, on a technical level, improve your vagal tone. And the way this, I'd like to encourage people to do one thing, I suppose, which is, you know, use this as your mantra. If in doubt, breathe out. Mm-hmm. Because we all breathe in more than we breathe out, and that's kind of the biggest problem. And when you breathe out, to hum. Yeah, so allow yourself to create some vibration, some air molecule resonance in your throat and chest when you breathe out. Do that 3 or 4 times. Forget about breathing in. I've never met anyone who fails to breathe in. I've met loads of people who fail to breathe out.
Yeah, no, I feel that for sure. I've loved it. Thank you so much for your time. I could speak to you for hours, in all honesty. So guys, if you're excited about what you've heard today and want to get your hands on your own Sensate, you can head over to getsensate.com/Fran, or hit the link in my Instagram bio and you can take advantage of a very generous £20 off.
Great. I'm really happy that we're able to do that.
Thank you so much. I've loved it. Really excited to see what the future holds for Sensate.
Fran, thank you so much. A delight to speak to you.
So if you got value from this and you know in your gut that now is the time to step up and start rewiring your thinking and start changing things for yourself, then book in a free discovery call so we can work out what needs to happen to get you from where you're at right now to the action-taking success you know you can be. If you want my eyes and ears on your problems, then I work with people one-on-one and through my programs. You can find all the details to book in a call in the show notes, the link in my bio on Instagram and on my website, franexcel.com. So stop waiting for if and when and choose to change things now, because you 100% can. I am here to believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. And as always, I hope you found this helpful and I will see you next week. Bye.